Hi again, this is Zach from the Strength Conditioning Department. I'm going to talk to you now about the practice report. So we're going to stick with women's soccer and we're going to look at 10-14 again. So these first two columns are going to be your injury status and participation. Same three color code of green, yellow, and red. Green means go, yellow means limited, red means out. As we go across, the practice RPE. Overall, this was how hard practice was in the eyes of the athlete. So the higher the number, the harder it was. The lower the number, the easier it was. Now, as we keep going, we're going to look at chest RPE. Chest RPE is a way for us to look at the cardiovascular side of practice. And the way that the question is presented to your athletes is, how hard did your heart and lungs work today? Higher the number, the harder it was. Lower the number, the easier it was. And this will be the same going across for all variables. Moving on to muscle RPE. The question we ask your athletes is, how tired do your muscles feel? Do they feel really tired, or do they feel fresh? Can you basically run a marathon? So if you're seeing a number here like this, this fifth athlete who reported a 10, she worked really hard today. I would probably expect high muscle soreness from her tomorrow. But then we look at the athlete above her, a 4. So you can see kind of the differences in the reports here. So this is the things you gotta pay attention to. Now we're gonna look at technical RPE. Technical RPE is how hard did you have to think today while training? An easier way to think about this is, did you do a lot of drills today that slowed the game down and have to think about where your body was in space, how you're moving them, etc. So if a high number is reported here, then they had to think really hard about what they were doing. If it scored low, then they weren't thinking too hard. It was just kind of intuitive. I will say something that would make sense is that if your technical RPE is high, realistically, your chest and muscles should be on the lower end just because of the nature of when you have to do these heavy thinking bouts. In games, we're not really thinking extremely hard because a lot of it's intuitive or is reflexes. So this athlete who reported a 10 across the board, I would take with a grain of salt. I believe that she was working hard and she probably was thinking hard as well, but definitely not as much as we conceptualize it as. So take it with a grain of salt. I would never go up to an athlete and just tell her to change it, but on our end, that would just be something to know. For the total practice duration, this is just how long that they practice. Pretty straightforward, but we need this so that it calculates the SRPE. So the SRPE here is going to be the duration times the total daily practice RPE. So that first number that we talked about. The higher the number here, the higher the load it was for the athlete. So we would just want to make sure that our loads are not getting too crazy and that none of them are appearing in the red. So as we roll down, again, you have your averages. If you have positions or events, you're going to see those listed here. Right now we have years. So you're going to see your average for your practice RPE, your average for your chest RPE, muscle RPE, technical RPE, duration, SRPE. It's really cool because I have a team right now that has positions in here. So I can say, oh, this position worked a lot harder than this one. Was that intentional? And it's provided us with a lot of really good insight. So I would suggest, if you know your positions for your athletes, to give those to us so that you can see how hard different positional groups are working. At the bottom here, the graphs are a little bit different. So on the right side, you're going to get your sport SRPE versus your readiness score. That one's about the same. It's just going to give us how hard the practice was versus our readiness score. So that's good to know. And then the left side here is the practice RPE versus readiness score. So how hard did they report practice was versus how prepared they were. You'll notice here that these 3 scores for 10, 11, 10, 12, and 10, 13 are at the 0, which kind of looks wonky, but when you think about it, they didn't practice that day. So obviously they're not going to have anything to report practice-wise. So that's why you're going to see that. which is kind of a good way to visualize your off days and how much rest you're allowing your athletes, and then also seeing how well your athletes are recovering. So if I were to look down here on 10-10, our athletes were around 23.5, but on our off days, they went up a whole point, which is pretty good. Overall, this team has pretty good readiness scores to begin with, so that's not a huge jump, but that is something we would want to see. We wouldn't want to see them going any lower. So this is our practice report. It gives us a snapshot into how practice made our athletes feel, and then also gives us a workload.